evening, and thank you for joining us for this special edition marking the 20th anniversary of Hurricane Rita. I'm Erika Harris. Hurricane Rita left its mark on Southeast Texas 2 decades ago. The storm at landfall prompted one of the largest evacuations in U.S. history. Tonight, we look back on the storm's impact and how it changed our response to hurricane preparedness. For many Southeast Texans, Rita meant hours on the road and huge traffic gridlock, watching the storm hit hundreds of miles away from their homes and waiting days, even weeks, to return home. The winds of Rita toppled and shattered trees, hundreds of thousands of them. The wind and tree damage collapsed the power grid, including the major transmission line bringing electricity into Southeast Texas. The system would take weeks to rebuild. People returning home suffered an intense heat wave without air conditioning. Businesses were torn apart, and many found their homes damaged, most often by tree limbs or entire trees. First, we began with the storm's formation and how Rita turned into a memory we won't soon forget.
Well, Hurricane Rita, one of the greatest hurricanes ever to move to the Gulf, in fact, the lowest pressure we've ever had recorded in the Gulf of Mexico, developed north of Haiti and the Dominican Republic the Sunday before it made landfall and just kept moving off to the west-northwest. Really didn't do too much for a while, stayed a tropical storm for a long period of time, moved through the Florida Straits, and that's when things got really going. Up to a Category 2 hurricane, went to Category 3 on the Wednesday just before landfall. But look what happened as it made that bend into the center of the Gulf. Category 5, and that pressure, 897 millibars. That's the lowest pressure we've ever seen in the Gulf. Fortunately, at least for our area, it did weaken some as it made that turn toward the northwest, dropped down to Category 4 by Friday, making that move toward the upper Texas, southwest Louisiana coastline. So we got a little bit of a break there. Fortunately, we did not see the full intensity. In fact, at landfall, which did occur early Saturday morning, pre-dawn hours there, on the 24th, it had diminished down to Category 3, and right at landfall was Category 2, making an exact landfall there just east of the Sabine River. That was over in the Johnson's Bayou Cameron area. They moved up into extreme eastern portions of Texas into Newton County. 115 miles per hour just before landfall, officially 110 at landfall, Category 2. Devastation nonetheless, big storm surge, mainly because of the intensity it was once it was out in the Gulf of Mexico.
We saw the windows going in and out. They finally shattered.
While most Southeast Texans evacuated, 3 of Fox 4's very own braved through the storm. When we come back, we'll hear their first-hand account of Hurricane Rita. According to emergency management officials, most Southeast Texans got out of harm's way, evacuated before Rita hit. But those who stayed faced a large and intense storm. Chief Meteorologist Greg Bostic, executive producer Scott Lawrence, and managing editor Tom Wright shared their memories of the night Rita roared in.
Everybody been seeing these videos for weeks of what happened of course, in New Orleans. And we started saying, and was truthful at that time, that this is worse than Katrina. It's stronger than Katrina.
I wouldn't say there was panic, but there was certainly a lot of fear.
As I was at the station at the time when Greg Bostic said, right now the winds of Rita are 180 miles an hour when it was in the Gulf, a few days away from landfall.
So the evacuation here was very, very intense, very massive.
You know, I have a vivid memory being out on I-10 doing a live report, and I'm watching all this traffic flow in from the west, meaning it's coming in from Houston, flowing into our traffic, and it was pretty obvious there was going to be a big mess.
We stayed at the station that night, just before it was about to hit. We actually stayed on the air, broadcast when no one else was doing so in the market.
So a group of us decided to stay. We couldn't stay at the station.
And then we ended up going to the Entergy building, and we were there with about 300 first responders, with right in the middle of things.
I had a friend who was in Tyler County. I stayed there.
Yeah, it was interesting that it seems like every storm we've had with all these hurricanes we've had in the past happened at night, and this was no exception. This one hit the full intensity about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning.
You know, it hit at night. It's not like you're going to go to sleep.
We were in the building when the winds hit more than 100 miles an hour. We saw the windows going in and out. They finally shattered.
So we didn't know exactly what was going on. We knew bad stuff was happening, but all the power was knocked out. It was just pitch black outside.
Imagine the worst weather that you can think of. And in those few minutes that you experience that weather, but that goes on now for 6 to 8 hours.
And all we could hear was sounds of things falling apart, the howling wind. So when daybreak rose, we finally could see enough light out there to see what had happened. So we knew it was bad.
Literally, it looked like what one would imagine if a bomb went off.
Wham, wham.
Coming up, when thousands of evacuees left home, they had no idea what would be awaiting them upon returning. When we come back, one family takes us through their journey of rebuilding after the storm. Thousands of Southeast Texans found themselves hundreds of miles away from home after Rita hit. Evacuating, despite its hardships, saved their lives. But evacuees had no idea what they would face when they returned. The first order of business, to cut away the trees blocking the roads and to cut away the trees on houses. Authorities discouraged people from immediately coming back.
My house is all to pieces.
Some did anyway, only to realize their situation was unlivable. They had few options.
All right, y'all good to go.
One common sight after the storm, people grilling meat, cooking the contents of now defrosting freezers. The damage varied. Some homes were unscathed, but also roofs collapsed into homes and businesses. Much of it depended on where the trees fell. The journey home would take days, even weeks for some. Iman Abraham shows us what one family found after returning home.
Yours took a while. Yeah. Remember?
Oh, I do remember.
Oh.
Ben and Margaret Bell have lived in their Orange County house for almost 50 years. They remember coming home after Rita smashed their house.
Literally, it looked like what one would imagine if a bomb went off.
Rita's winds toppled and broke trees across Southeast Texas, blocking streets and cutting into homes. The Bells came home to find a hole in their ceiling and a tree in their living room.
It took the top out of that big oak tree that's out the front, shoved it across the circle drive, and pulverized an area of brick, probably about that size, about a foot or so from the top of the house, from top of the brick anyway, and then flipped over and hung down.
Came through that roof.
From the
Through
ceiling.
the attic and into this room. It was a big tree.
The Bells documented the aftermath of Rita.
Make a scrapbook and describe everything that
A
happened.
hole in their roof and through the
You
ceiling.
can actually see the sky.
The rain that came in, damaging the furniture and the floor.
It was a good bit of damage in terms of the water, and then of course the roof was, it cracked not only the covering but the beams and all kind of stuff.
It was overwhelming when they saw it for the first time.
So when we did come back and we walked in, Ben just looked at me. He said, "Now don't worry. We're going to get this all back just like it was."
Margaret says it was overwhelming trying to find help to fix their home.
And I got in the car right away and started riding around the neighborhood because I thought, we can't be the only ones that had a tree in our house, and we weren't.
The Bells were lucky to find someone to help. Repairs took months.
They worked out here for weeks and weeks just to remove the number of trees. It was pretty bizarre, quite frankly.
So many trees went down.
By the time spring came around, the Bells were able to rebuild their home from the floor all the way to the roof.
Trapped on the roads was the unfortunate story for millions of evacuees attempting to flee the path of Rita. When we come back, hear the testimony of one reporter as she ventured into the chaos and what changes TxDOT has made. Hurricane Rita was a turning point when it comes to the way evacuations are done. While evacuating for Rita, highways became gridlocked with thousands of evacuees fleeing from the storm. For some, it became a death trap, dozens losing their lives. One major issue, gasoline. The operators of gas stations did what everyone else was doing, closed up shop and evacuated. Drivers stuck in 12 to 30-hour traffic jams ran out of gas with no place to refuel. The state would later remedy the problem by contracting with gas stations to stay open with generator power during the evacuations and following landfall. Those who did not have reliable transportation to leave were put on buses. The buses joined the gridlock. A 50-bus caravan from Beaumont traveled from one shelter destination to another to find evacuees from the Houston area were already there. There was no evacuation scene more desperate than the Jack Brooks Regional Airport. Here's how Tom Wright reported the event in the 2005 documentary Hurricane Rita, Disaster in Southeast Texas.
While many Southeast Texans were trapped in traffic, tired and running out of gas in East Texas, another difficult situation developed at home. Thousands of people with no way out.
As it was pointed to Matagorda and everybody thought it was going there, well, you know, they have special needs people too. And all of the resources that were contracted for our area evidently were contracted in those areas too. And then the state stepped in and commandeered some of the resources and directed them to South County. And as they were moving those people, and it's understandable, I'm not being critical of that. We would be doing the same thing. Well, all the resources went to that area. Then in a matter of hours, a storm turns and we have to move our people, and you just cannot redeploy those resources that quickly. And at that point, we started getting calls from the hospitals and nursing homes that, we cannot handle these people. We don't have the ambulance. They've all gone to the Matagorda, so what are we going to do with these people? So we had to scramble fairly quickly to come up with a plan. And as it turned out, Judge Griffith and the mayors of the cities made contact with Washington, telling them, hey, here's what happened. We need to get these people out of here.
U.S. military cargo planes flew into the Southeast Texas Regional Airport. People were flown to destinations around the country, some of them needing constant medical care. Christus St. Elizabeth nurses boarded the planes with their patients, uncertain of their destination. 8,000 people were flown out of Southeast Texas.
I'll quote the colonel that was in charge of it, and I'll never forget this quote because he's involved in a lot of emergency operations. He said, "We have never moved this many people in this short of time with this little help." So it was a quite amazing undertaking by the military.
Tre Sanchez shows us how the Texas Department of Transportation created improved hurricane evacuation plans.
Kara Hawthorne was just one of thousands to flee Southeast Texas with family. What set her apart, she was a KFDM news reporter documenting her journey with a camcorder.
I brought that video camera thinking that if we lost the ability to charge our work cameras, I could use it as a backup. I did not anticipate using it throughout the whole evacuation process.
Hawthorne says on her way to work the morning of the evacuation, she was driving over the bridge at Brooks Road when she realized traffic on I-10 was at a complete standstill.
I've never seen anything like that. Even during a road closure, it did not look the way it did that day.
The former reporter says a big factor in traffic was that Houston was evacuating at the same time. Southeast Texans were forced to navigate the blocked roadways without modern navigation tools.
So I had a paper map that I'd randomly brought with me, and that I'd had, in between the seats, and that's how I was able to navigate our way out of Southeast Texas, really.
Navigation technology wasn't the only road safety improvement made in the last 20 years. After Hurricane Rita, the Texas Department of Transportation implemented a more organized evacuation system based on zip codes, targeting neighborhoods and communities to evacuate first. TxDOT also developed evacuation and contraflow routes as the new standard for hurricane preparation. Hawthorne says for her, Rita was the storm that shifted her perspective forever. I'm Tre Sanchez reporting.
Darkness was the new normal for weeks following Hurricane Rita. The storm wake-up call and lesson learned. Up next, the improvements made to make sure the lights stay on. Hurricane Rita left much of Southeast Texas in the dark for weeks. It was just one way Southeast Texas learned how vulnerable it was to a major hurricane. Street after street, mile after mile of down power lines and utility poles. Here's how then Entergy CEO Joe Domino described the damage in the 2005 documentary.
It was somewhat unnerving to see how much damage had been done, and the plan that we would have to implement and put in place to get power up to an area that basically was totally black. Had no power plants feeding into it, no transmission lines really connecting to any extent to the outside world.
Taylor Justice shows us how Entergy is improving the power system for future storms.
The fierce winds, howling at more than 120 miles an hour. Hurricane Rita blowing in with a vengeance. September 24th, 2005. Entire neighborhoods sat in the dark for days, some for weeks. Crews raced to restore power.
Working through the night, working all day, going home after 16 hours.
Darren Stark started his career as a utility lineman in the aftermath of Rita.
You can barely walk just because you're so tired, but be able to go home and put your head on your pillow and go to sleep thinking I've just restored power to a lot of people that needed help.
Rita exposed major weaknesses in the electric grid. Wooden poles snapped. Transmission towers blew over. Millions were in the dark. But Rita also triggered a turning point. Since then, Entergy Texas has invested heavily in its infrastructure. One priority, upgrading poles.
After Hurricane Beryl come through, they were able to withstand some of the wind a lot better. So setting composite poles, setting steel poles, just building and designing everything to be stronger on the resiliency side.
These days, the grid is smarter. New technology can detect outages, reroute power, and restore it faster. But there's still more to the job than meets the eye.
There's a lot more to it than what people think. Like I said, just to flip another switch, I hear that all the time. Hey, why can't we just go ahead and flip the switch on? Well, there's a lot to that.
So I was a teenager when we got hit by Rita. My dad actually worked for Entergy. He was a lineman.
Paul Blackburn is a customer service manager with Entergy. The memories of Rita are personal.
I can just remember vividly, him working 16-hour days. We had no power at the house. It was really terrible. He was exhausted.
Today, he says Entergy is planning ahead.
Southeast Texas is growing. We need more power. We have a plan before the PUCT for 2 additional power plants, one of which we'll have here in the Golden Triangle, and another one which will be just outside of Cleveland.
20 years after Rita, Entergy says it's not just about restoring power. It's about building a future that can withstand the next storm. Reporting in Beaumont, I'm Taylor Justice.
Across 4 states, Hurricane Rita caused 120 deaths and more than $18 billion in damage. Rita will be remembered for immense intensity, widespread impacts, and the major improvements of hurricane preparedness that followed. It will also be the storm that taught us preparation and resiliency makes us stronger. Thank you for joining us. Be safe and always be prepared. Good night.